As Brittany said, I'm the beef cattle specialist veterinarian for the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. I'm on the producer education team, and my role is basically an extension veterinarian for the beef industry. So lots of educational resources, veterinary outreach, trying to help producers of all livestock species, even though I work for a Cattlemen's Association, I guess have continuous improvement. We're always pushing for continuous improvement. I'm originally from Akron, so I am a Colorado, but all three of my degrees are from CSU, so lots of ag in my background. So today I'm going to talk about zoonotic disease risk, and I actually had one of my friends screenshot this off your Instagram, and they're like, "Oh, what are you going to talk about?" And I was like, "I'm going to tell people how to protect themselves, because we in ag are really bad about that." And I can say that because my husband is a farmer, and there are situations that he gets himself into where I'm just like, okay, I'm glad you didn't lose an arm or something like that. But I think we all, at different points when we're working, we put the animals, we put the business in front of our own health, and so hopefully I'll try to guide you in ways that you can protect yourself while you're working with a number of animals. How many people are around, I guess, is your livestock species is cattle? Okay, sheep, one, goats, pigs, okay, you're all my other species. I guess which beef cattle and dairy. Okay. So a lot of the things that we're going to talk about today apply to all those species. I mean, there are specific diseases that you can get from small ruminants and cattle that maybe pigs don't carry, and you'll see that a lot of my stuff is geared towards cattle, but it still applies to all those other species. So I'm going to start off with talking about zoonotic disease. So who can give me a definition of zoonotic disease? By a human. Yeah, so it's that disease that goes between humans and animals. We can actually, it's called reverse zoonosis, so we can actually give animals diseases. While that's more rare, we're going to focus on the piece where we're getting diseases from animals. These are bacteria, viruses, bacteria, fungi. Anybody just had a county fair that somebody may have had ringworm? Or an animal might have had ringworm. But these are some pictures that I've seen. The farm babe on social media, even though I love her, she posted this goat picture, and I was like, why are you putting baby goats in your kitchen sink? This is not okay. But different ways that we are exposed to animals on a daily basis that increase our risk of potentially contracting these diseases. So zoonoses affect human health, animal health, financial health, and public health. So human, obviously we can get sick. If we're sick, we're not able to work, we're losing time on the operation. Some of these diseases can result in long-term illness. I have a vet friend in Texas who, after a multi-month investigation, they actually found out that she has Q fever, and it's been causing health issues for years beyond when she got infected. And so, well, how many of you guys did the brucellosis vaccine, the original strain 19 vaccine? Anybody? So that strain was actually very infectious to humans, and so if you ever had a needle stick or anything like that, it was a really big deal because you actually got brucellosis. But the new vaccine has made it safer for people to handle. So some of these diseases can cause that long-term illness. Animal health, obviously, we don't want our animals getting sick. If they're sick, they're not producing the way that we want them to. They can die from these infectious diseases. And then production losses, obviously that plays into our, we are worried about the animal from a health standpoint, a welfare standpoint, and then also a financial standpoint, because that is a business loss. Financial, it overlaps a lot with what we've already talked about, so lost income, disease costs. So if you have, say you have an outbreak of hypathic avian influenza in your dairy, that is costing you a lot of time, it's costing you a lot of money, it's costing you a lot of animals, because those animals aren't, again, producing up to what they need to be. Zoonoses can cause trade loss, so high path would be an example of that one. Not for the cattle industry, but the poultry industry. If we start using a vaccine in the poultry industry, then we lose a lot of our trade partners. So zoonoses plays a role in that. And then public health. So food safety plays a big role. I showed pictures of raw milk earlier. We'll talk about that today too. And then also illness to the people we are producing the product for. So who can get sick? Anybody who lives near or works with animals in their environment. I guess I should shout out. So the slides that look like this, I got it from Iowa State University Center for Food Safety and Public Health. It's at the end of the presentation as a resource if you guys would like to go check them out. They have a lot of great posters, learning documents that you can look at different diseases, and they divide it up into cattle, horses, pigs, etc. So highly recommend this as a resource, but this is where some of my slides came from. But you can see that anybody from the people who own the animals, who work with the animals on a daily basis, to people who are visiting farms, they can all be exposed to these zoonotic diseases. Who can get sick? Any of us can really get sick, but the ones we're mostly worried about is anyone with that weakened immune system. So our kids under age 5, our neonates, their immune systems aren't as well developed as ours. So when you expose them to something new, the effects can be much worse than other people who may have been exposed to it. Pregnant women, I'm not sure why that photo didn't come through. People over 65, and then people with long-term illness. So any are chronic illness, if anyone's going through chemo or anything like that, all those different groups of people are at a higher risk of getting sick from these zoonotic diseases. So how do you get sick? People or animals must breathe in, touch, or swallow germs that cause zoonoses in order to get sick. A lot of this comes down to poop. So poop, it gets on everything. And I think we'll go through this. I think one of the things that at least I am guilty of is I probably don't wash my hands nearly as often as I should when I'm working with animals. Yes, we'll talk about that later. But there's lots of different transmission routes that pathogens can be spread. And I'm not going to go into all of these, but different ways. Aerosol, so we think of that like flu virus in humans. Direct contact, so that nose-to-nose contact for animals or people. Fomites, so any of your equipment, your needle caps. I'm going to tell you multiple times today to stop putting needle caps in your mouth. Anything that is an inanimate object that could get covered with any of those bodily fluids that we're worried about from animals. So that's feces, blood, saliva, urine, reproductive fluids. So if you're helping a calving or a lambing, those fluids can be infectious. Oral, so this is mostly like food and water, but we know that cows and goats, they like to mouth everything. So if your equipment is dirty, they're going to mouth that and get sick, or could get sick. Vector-borne is from our ticks and flies. And then zoonotic disease is not really its own route, but it encompasses all of these. So we can get sick from all of those different transmission routes. Diseases can enter the farm in a number of ways. I stole this from Iowa State University because I thought it was fantastic. But different ways that germs can get in. So aerosolized particles can get into our buildings. Any of our species that actually use buildings to house their animals. Rodents, birds, flies, and wildlife. We're mostly worried about feed and water being contaminated by those. Incoming animals and transport vehicles, so making sure our vehicles are clean when they're coming in, making sure we quarantine animals if possible, so that we aren't bringing in some illness. Equipment, so that's not just the equipment on the farm, but think of all the deliveries you get on a daily basis from FedEx, from the mailman, from the mineral supplement that's coming in. there's a lot of different ways that diseases can come in. The people also, so people delivering, any of your consultants coming onto the farm, visitors if you do participate in agritourism, and then feed and water. So big thing that we want to do is keep germs out and stop disease spread from animals to humans as much as possible. Zero risk does not exist, but we can try to mitigate that risk as much as possible. So germs, the main way that we get sick from these is openings in skin. So either a bite or scratch, needle stick, chapped or broken skin. How many of you have had cuts in your hand? How many of you have cuts on your hands at this very moment? Do you wear gloves when you're working with animals if you have open cuts? That's one simple thing that we can think about. Needle stick, I am the lucky person who has stuck myself with the brucellosis vaccine. So things like, so that is technically considered a zoonotic disease, even though the vaccine is supposed to be safer for people. So when you break open that skin, that's what allows that pathogen to get in and circulate throughout the system and proliferate. Eyes, ears, mouth, or eyes, nose, mouth. So all of our mucous membranes is how I describe that. So you're breathing in, you can breathe it in, swallowing, or anybody with long hair. I've actually had vet students what we think they got sick from when we were out on dairies. We were going through a cryptosporidium and a salmonella Dublin outbreak all at the same time, which was not good. But we think one of the vet students, she didn't have her hair pulled up, and so her hair got contaminated, and it got into her mouth. So if you have long hair, keep your hair up. That's another way to protect yourself. How sick can you get? We can go from no infection to death in some of our diseases. A lot of these absent or mild signs, you may not recognize that you actually have something. And then until you start getting these moderate or severe signs, that's when you're like, oh, something is not right. We could have reproductive problems. I keep talking about brucellosis. There are a lot of diseases that any of our ruminants or swine that if they have stillborn babies, or if they are aborting, a lot of those diseases are also zoonotic. And so I brought a bunch of stuff to show you to keep yourself safe when you're helping with birthing animals. Long-term chronic illness we talked about, and then potentially disability. So I threw this in here. We added this to our, so if you guys heard of the Beef Quality Assurance Program, so our team manages that, and we're actually updating our manual right now. And we added this to our biosecurity section. And it's kind of to give an idea of when we're talking about disease spread and how to stop it, we use this epidemiologic triangle. And so we have the environment, the pathogen, and the host. And all of those have to have this like perfect relationship for the disease to occur in I guess, animals or humans. Infectious diseases are capable of spreading to others, and then these components all affect each other. And I have an example here in a second. So all three of these are connected, and when we're trying to mitigate the risk of zoonotic disease, we're basically trying to break the cycle somewhere. So I did this example of calf scours, even though, I mean, hopefully humans are not getting sick from calf scours, but we certainly could. So things that affect the host or the calf. So age, we know our younger calves, less than 2 weeks old, are more susceptible to these scouring pathogens than our older calves. Colostrum, if we have no or poor colostrum, that baby's immune system does not, they don't get that passive immunity where they're able to fight off things that are in the environment. Good nutrition, dehydration, and other illnesses. So if they also have, say they are scouring and they have pneumonia, that's going to affect how this animal responds to the illness, but also the treatment. The pathogen that we're concerned about, there's lots of viruses, bacteria, protozoa that cause calf scours, but we can also have a nutritional imbalance. So if we're not mixing our milk replacer appropriately, that can cause scouring. or a combination of all of the above. So common agents, E. coli, salmonella, rotavirus, coronavirus, and crypto. So E. coli, salmonella, and crypto are all zoonotic diseases. So if you have new people coming onto the ranch or the dairy farm, and generally, at least on the dairy, they get put in the calf area first. They might be at higher risk of getting sick from these scouring calves. Also plays a role is environment. So we know that scourge pathogens thrive in moisture, but the excessive heat or cold also plays a role. Bedding, if we're not changing our bedding out, cleaning that out. Stocking density, we increase stocking density. You have increased pathogen load, which could impact how many calves get scours. Sandhill's calving system, which I'm not going to go into, but it's basically you have, as your animals calve, you move the animals that have not calved into a brand new part of the pasture. So the babies are being born on clean pasture so that they're not exposed to whatever those older calves had. Bottle and bucket hygiene, making sure we're cleaning those appropriately. I put this up here because the same dairy I told you that we had a salmonella and crypto outbreak at the same time. We figured out that the salmonella, we did samples all over the environment and trying to figure out where the source was coming from. And we found it on the bottle brush that was cleaning the bottles. So make sure your equipment that you're using to clean is also clean. And then biosecurity. Scours is really, it's a husbandry problem. Like we need to keep paying attention to this environmental piece. It's probably the biggest way that you can improve this, but that's your example. So all of this comes down to poop. So we get like poop is on everything. We can get infected with particles. So just be careful. Prevention and biosecurity. So I added biosecurity one because that's one of my topics that I talk about all the time and I couldn't help myself. But biosecurity and prevention is really the biggest thing that we have control over on all of our operations. Each one of you has a different operation, even if there's two cow-calf ranches in here, you're likely running it completely different than the other person. So biosecurity is customized to each operation, but these are practices designed to prevent the introduction and or spread of diseases. The goal is to minimize risk of disease spread. Again, I said it before, but there's no such thing as zero risk, but there are ways that we can mitigate and try to lessen that risk. Dr. Nick Lyons is a veterinarian that I worked with, and he said that biosecurity is a verb, which means it is always changing and adapting to new situations. It's a continuous effort. I keep picking on dairies, so sorry. But dairy's biosecurity plan today is not the same as it was 6 months ago. So like, you can't use the same biosecurity plan that you had in February because your risk is completely different now. So this could change on a daily basis. It could change on a monthly basis. So always adapting your biosecurity plan to what you're doing today, but then also remember that you have to adapt it. Again, we're reducing the potential harm for both you and the animals in your care and minimizing that risk. Biosecurity is important. This plays into what we already talked about with zoonoses, why they're important. So animal health, human health, and business health. If our animals are sick, they're not, there's a welfare component to that, but there's also a performance component to that, whether they are in the feed yard or if they're in their, the reproduction herd. Human health, so protecting your family and all the workers from different illness. And then business health plays into all of that. It goes into business sustainability to improve biosecurity. Key principles, if any of you came out to the Fraser symposium, I went over this a little bit, so apologize for the overlap, but it's all still important. Key principles include exclusion, physical separation, cleaning, and disinfection. So exclusion is if we have this imaginary way to create a moat around our operation and nothing can come in, nothing can come out. Our swine and our poultry industries have tried to get as close to this as possible. That's why it's shower in, shower out. They have ventilation systems, water systems where they control everything coming in and out. this is really difficult to exist in the cattle industry. So we have to think of other ways to protect our animals and our people. Separation is probably ways that we think about, you might be already doing this, and it's just being intentional about what else we could be doing. So physical, that could be a wall, gate, fence, or distance. And so this is an example, one of my friends down in Texas, I think. This side is their cow-calf herd. This side is where their show animals go. So show animals have a different disease risk than our herd that never leaves the farm. So they have distance in between that to reduce some of that risk. Quarantine, so the time between visits. How many of you have gone out of the country and visited an ag operation? A couple of you? Couple of you? Yeah. So what guidance were you provided when you came back to your farm?
Well, we all took showers before we got back home.
There you go. So I mitigation step. So I think about, I'm gonna make fun of one of my friends because I can. I got to go to Africa, I'd go to Uganda and study foot and mouth disease. And so I didn't want to be the vet for a National Cattlemen's Association that brought back foot and mouth disease. And so all my clothes got left in Uganda. When I got back, I cleaned my entire suitcase, like outside, inside, it got soaked in disinfectant. Everything went straight into the washer. And then I had a 7-day quarantine basically between when I was on the farm in Uganda to when I could be around susceptible species. And so we actually have a form that we just put on the BQA website for people. If you do have visitors coming onto your operation, it goes through like, if you are a domestic visitor, these are the recommendations that you should have before you come on my farm. If there's an international visitor, these are the recommendations before you come on my farm. So that's something really important that we need to think about because we don't want to affect anybody else, or we don't want to take something from the US to somebody else's farm, but we also don't want to bring anything back. But my story on my buddy, he and his wife went to South Africa for their honeymoon, and they went on a safari, and that was right when it's a couple of years ago when South Africa was having just a massive foot and mouth disease outbreak. They had like 60 outbreaks all at the same time. And I was like, I sent him an article and I was like, did you clean your shoes? He's like, oh, well, we were only around wildlife. And I was like, well, buffalo are reservoirs for foot and mouth disease for up to 5 years. And he like called me immediately. He's like, are you kidding me? What do I need to do? But I think we can all be better at like, as international visitors, but also within ag, like what are the risks that we're bringing back to our farm? So
I was just in Hawaii. It's not a different country technically, but it might as well be. Like humble brag, I was in Hawaii. And they have a tree fungus that they're really worried about on Kauai. And so at the end of every trail, there was a station set up for not only brushing everything off your boots, but there was a spray, a disinfectant spray that you were supposed to spray on your shoes as well.
But
it was empty, so I couldn't do that. But.
Right. I mean, and so yeah, we'll have another conversation on disinfection. Also, only helps if we keep up.
Right.
Yeah. Great example. So, if you have new animals coming on, new arrival quarantine. What was I just reading? So even your show animals should have a quarantine. Oh, that's what it was. A lot of our viruses are contagious viruses that are chronic in sheep and goats. The quarantine is actually like over 120 days because these viruses won't show up for that amount of time. So obviously not very many people do that, but it's something to consider. Stocker and feed yard, you can't quarantine those technically, so we just recommend checking the animals every day, catching disease as quickly as possible so you can identify it and treat it. Procedural, changing footwear and employees dedicated to one area. So dairies, your calf crew only works on calves. They don't go work with the sick adults and then come back to the calves and infect all the calves. Cleaning, making sure we're doing this appropriately. We have to remove all the organic debris, i.e. the poop. That will, because the excuse me, the organic debris will decrease the effectiveness of your disinfectant. Soak items in hot water if available, scrub, wipe, spray, and pressure wash, rinse all areas and allow it to dry. I guess I should put a note in here. It depends on what product you're using. Read the label and follow what they say. We talked about bottles already. All of your equipment, if you share equipment between farms, or if you only have one loader that you use for feed and maybe to, you for the dead truck or something like that, cleaning, disinfecting in between uses. All of these, I don't have an ear tagger on here, but disinfecting the ear tagger in between use or the tattooer between use is also important. And then disinfection. So read the label again. So you have to use the correct product for the pathogen that you're worried about, correct concentration and sufficient contact time. If we don't have all three of those, your disinfectant is not gonna work appropriately. Okay, so we'll talk about a little bit about transmission and source here. So entry, different ways that you can protect yourself. Wash your hands. I know this sounds elementary, but protocol drift happens and we get complacent. How many of you wash your hands for a full 20 seconds every time you do it? So I got really good. I say the ABCs when I'm washing my hands. It's just an easy way to at least make myself continue to wash my hands for the appropriate amount of time. Wear protective clothing, so coveralls, boots, masks, goggles, and gloves if needed, depending on what you're worried about. Avoid exposure, so cover your open wounds. Be careful around animals if you have a weak immune system, or one of my coworkers is pregnant, so we're not going to ask her to go do certain activities. Or when I was in practice, one of the veterinarians in my practice was pregnant, so like after a certain amount of time, we're just like, you don't get to babies vaccinated anymore, and you're not allowed in the to preg check anymore because it should, safety issues. Like, we had that conversation. Personal protective equipment varies on the task. Examples, eye protection, respiratory, hearing, skin protection, boots and boot covers, closed-toed shoes. All of these are, again, depending on your operation, what you're able to do. If you do have agritourism people, make sure that if they're not cleaning their boots or their shoes, maybe provide them some boot covers so they're not bringing anything onto your operation. Ear protection, I feel like this is something that we do a terrible job at protecting ourselves from, so make sure when you're around equipment in loud places, wear some ear protection. I put the long palpation sleeves on here to remind you to protect yourself when you're with birthing animals. Transmission, it seems silly at like cooking food properly. Like, you can get zoonotic disease. Have you guys heard of the listeria outbreak with boar's head? That's a zoonotic disease due to poor cleaning at the processing place. But we can get listeria. Oh, I should have brought that video. I have a really cool video of a dairy cow with listeria. She's so weird. Anyway, but we can get listeria from drinking raw milk or being exposed to raw milk. So, cooking your food properly. Again, washing your hands, separate raw and cooked foods, cook your foods to the appropriate temperature. Don't thaw meat on the counter, and freeze or refrigerate food within 2 hours, but that reduces a lot of foodborne illness that can also be zoonotic. Biosecurity, we talked about this, so keeping diseases out. You either limit farm access or you at least provide guidance to people coming onto your farm. And so if you have people coming on, require them to have clean clothes and clean boots. Maybe you provide them coveralls or farm-specific equipment so that they wear that. Manage manure, so keeping manure away from feed and water sources. Washing your hands if you get it on your hands. Controlling insects and ticks, so obviously we can't keep animals indoors. Maybe cats and dogs, we can do that, but don't let water accumulate and use insecticides. Try to reduce the risk of diseases being spread that way. We talked about cleaning and disinfection, but making sure you do these in the correct order and with the correct products is really important. With animals, there are different ways that you could decrease your pathogen load, I guess, within your herd. So clean, dry housing, a lot of this is husbandry. So the better we can take care of our animals, the better that they're gonna be able to respond to whatever risk might be around. Make sure cattle have enough food. Nutrition is the number one thing that impacts our immune system. Keep stress low. BQA recommends a lot of low stress handling. If animals are stressed, they shed those pathogens at higher rates. So we want to keep stress low. Vaccinate against diseases that you're able to and that are specific to your herd. Prevent parasites. This includes in your cats and dogs. There are actually a lot of parasites that we can get from our cats and dogs. So make sure they're getting dewormed on a regular basis, especially if you have anybody in your circle that is a transporter or a livestock hauler. They might keep their dog in the cab with them or something like that. Highly recommend them making sure their dogs are healthy too, because they're in such close proximity. These are some different, remind me when I have time. You're good. Okay. I'm just thinking about how many slides I have left. So these are different examples of disease transmission that I came up with, again, focusing on cattle, but a lot of these apply to other species. So diseases that we can get from cattle: Salmonella, E. coli, crypto, brucellosis, tuberculosis, listeria, and others. These are not all inclusive, but ones that you may recognize. Cattle and swine can share a lot of diseases, including ringworm, brucellosis, lepto, salmonella, tuberculosis, and crypto. We don't have a feral swine problem in Colorado, but other, like Texas is my worst case scenario for a lot of different disease things, but they have a lot of feral swine, so that's why I teach them. Wildlife can share a lot of things with our cattle, so rabies is a big one, leptospirosis, ticks, worms, TB, not necessarily in Colorado, but in other parts of the country. So Michigan has a big TB, tuberculosis issue with one section of their white-tailed deer population. And then equipment. So as a fomite, your equipment can spread a lot of things to your cattle. So BRD, so say you, in our BQA transportation program, we talk about planning out your transportation trips and the types of animals that you're gonna be transporting. So if you're gonna be doing, say you're a cattle hauling company and you have a feedlot to haul some fat cattle to the packing plant, but then you are gonna go pick up some beef on dairy animals and take it to the calf ranch. You don't wanna do the beef on dairy animals after the feedlot animals, because the feedlot animals will have more pathogens to pass on to the calves that have a lower, or not as developed immune system. So thinking about the ways that we, I guess the patterns on how we load animals. Salmonella and E. coli, this is more of a can be a food safety risk on hides. So if you say you're hauling 3 loads of fat cattle in one day, first load is probably not gonna be as dirty. That third load, with all those cattle that have been in that trailer or that cattle pot, the contamination from the poop on the sides of the trailer can contaminate the hide once it goes to the packing plant. So that plays a role too. So it's not just about zoonotic disease or disease to your cattle, but also food safety risk. Okay. Any questions so far? We can swap stories later. So biosecurity, it's all about disease prevention. Disease prevention is that insurance. You're paying the premiums, you're putting the work in, and you hope that you never have to cash in that insurance. You appreciate it when disaster strikes, so people who are already doing biosecurity measures before HIPATH are probably a lot better off than people who weren't doing biosecurity measures. If biosecurity is working, no one knows. That's why, at least from somebody who teaches about biosecurity is not a sexy topic that people want to talk about, because it's something that you do every day and you just continually do it, and so people, it's not exciting to people because they're just like, oh, I do that every day. But we get complacent and we have protocol drift. So how do we continue to hold ourselves accountable for what we're doing? And when there's a labor shortage, time is a precious commodity. So effective biosecurity takes time and practice, but once you get people trained, that actually makes you more efficient in the long run. So best practices, we recognize, again, you can't have Fort Knox, you can't keep everything out or in, but we know that practices need to be practical and executable, which increases the likelihood that people are actually going to continue to do them. Each operation is going to be different, so if you have different species on your farm, if you have show animals, if you maybe you work on a completely different part of the farm, so if you're working in the feed mill at a feed yard, your biosecurity risk is going to be different than if you're working in the hospital. So that might change how you take care of yourself. Each of you is going to have different requirements based on you, the individual, but also what your role is on the plan. So we recommend working with your veterinarian and resource team to help you develop these biosecurity practices. When I'm looking at risks for the operation, I like to put it into buckets. And so this is not specific to zoonotic disease, but I had this slide, so I left it in. So animal movement, so are you perching new animals? Are you mixing at shows? Is there local spread of something that you need to be worried about? Personnel, who's interacting with the animals? Do you interact with sick animals or not sick animals? And do you have visits by people who have livestock on their operations? Oh, branding. How many of you guys do participate in branding? Do you make sure that your tack and all your clothes are clean before you go to that next operation? That's how vehicles and equipment, milk tankers, trailers, all vehicles, food, and slurry. This is not all inclusive, but this is how I bucket things. But germs can come from the animals, the environment, food and water, insects and ticks. So animals, we talked about the body fluids and tissues. Skin surface is a big one, bites and scratches. Animal environment, your air, surface, equipment, soil and manure, wild animals, food and water, meat and milk, eggs and water, and then insects and ticks, so mosquitoes, flies, and ticks. Ticks are becoming more and more prevalent in areas that they have previously not been in, so pay attention for those. Animals, these are different ways that we can get zoonotic diseases, so skin sores, hair, and hides, so any of our maybe fungal diseases, but even just like the dander, if you will, from the animals can carry different pathogens. Obviously, if they're coughing, sneezing, saliva or mucus coming out of their mouths. I'll say this more than once because I want it to stick. If your hand goes into the mouth of an animal, it needs to have a glove on it. Full stop. There are too many diseases that occur from the saliva of animals that we are susceptible to, and I have a case study to show you at the end of this to explain why that's so important. But I'll say that again, if your hand goes into the mouth of an animal, it needs to have a glove on it. Manure, urine, fluids during calving and afterbirth. I'm going to say it on the back end too. If you're at the back end of an animal and you're working with, I don't care which hole you're working with, you need to have gloves on. I was just at a cattle vet conference, and one of our scholarship winners had this really cool picture of him helping with the calving, and he had no gloves on. Oh, like, come on, dude. So always wear gloves when you're working with a birthing animal. And then meat and milk. So we know our milking crews have a higher risk for certain diseases than most, so how do we predict them? Animal environment, so we've talked a lot about a lot of these, so manure, bedding, as we're cleaning that out, that helps improve the health of the animals, but it also reduces the risk for humans getting sick, keeping our feed and water sources safe, equipment used for feed. Maybe you have dedicated feed equipment. If you don't, we need to clean and disinfect those. New babies and young kids. There was a dairy that I worked with when I was at CSU. I taught at CSU, I didn't say that, but a lot of my dairy stories are from dairies that I worked with there, but they were doing a lot of tourism with people, with kids, and they were allowing the kids to go from the new babies to the old babies, back to the new babies, and I'm just like, you can't do that. One, you're gonna get the calves sick, but you can hospitalize that child if you don't change the way that you're doing this. And they actually, after 3 or 4 times of me scolding them, they finally put in a bathroom so that they can wash hands after touching the calves. And they only allowed the visitors to, I think they touched like a 2 or 3 week old calf. So one of the older calves, so that the younger calves weren't exposed to whatever the humans were carrying around. Food and water. So this is why I have all these random water bottles with me. I like to have water bottles that cover my mouthpiece so that you don't get crud on them or dust or anything. So I just have a bunch of different examples of the mouthpiece being covered. This is obviously not appropriate, but that's why I brought those. I travel a lot for my job right now, and so I'm in airports, and airports are disgusting. And so same thing, like I don't want my mouthpiece touching anything that I'm around, so that's my biggest recommendation is get a water bottle or a drinking vessel that you can cover the mouthpiece. Also, I didn't bring snacks, but if you have, like, if I was palpating and I needed a snack, I always did like a granola bar that I could pull the wrapper off, but not have to, like the poop wasn't getting on my food and I could still eat it. So try to do things like that. Protecting yourself if you are working with the milk of any animal. So a lot of our dairies we recommend, at least especially right now with high path going through, goggles to protect your eyes or face shields, which are back there, mask potentially, gloves, make sure you're wearing gloves. Excuse me. I don't know if you guys do this in hot weather, but I will double glove, so I'll put 2 sets of gloves on, and then if that outside glove gets super dirty, I take that off. But then that bottom glove is still, I'm able to put another set of gloves on, because if your hands get super sweaty, you know, gloves are, it's terrible trying to get it back on. So I double glove and remove the outer layer and put another one on. Pasteurization kills a lot of things. That's why pasteurization of milk, it's been around for over 100 years, one of our greatest public health successes. We're protecting them from a lot of things. Q fever, listeria, salmonella, E. coli, brucellosis, tuberculosis. What else am I missing? There's a whole list of them.
High path AI, no?
Yeah, high path AI, of course. So pasteurization helps, and then keeping our cooking our food to an appropriate temperature. Insects and ticks. We don't have any real labeled products for ticks in our livestock species. That's the other thing. Don't trust over-the-counter products that you get. They have to be labeled for food animal. If they're not labeled for food animal, they're not allowed to be used in them. So read labels, even if you're getting over-the-counter stuff. Mosquitoes can carry a lot of bloodborne pathogens that are also infectious to humans. And then flies. So I think about it with pink eye, but flies are really good about like picking up any sort of pathogen and carrying it wherever. So if you have flies on your food or on your drinking vessel, it can carry stuff. So easy ways to think about preventing zoonoses. So washing your hands when you're around animals, but also keeping your animal areas and equipment as clean as possible. Avoid livestock or poultry if you have a weakened immune system. Try to avoid insects, ticks, and wildlife. Be safe, wear protective clothing. So gloves, coveralls, masks if you need to cover your skin, long sleeves, and then keep yourself and your family healthy. Sometimes I think we do, well, I'll talk about training, but I think we do a lot of training for the people that we hire, but sometimes we don't do that same training for the people in our family. So we need to make sure everybody's getting that training. So protecting yourself from different germ sources, this is a little bit of a repeat from before. Carcasses of birds, livestock, and other animals, that's also something to think about. If you guys are, how many of you necropsy your animals on farm? Oh man, I'm gonna highly recommend that you guys start doing that. Necropsies are so useful. But if you are necropsying, make sure you're wearing protective gear. Body fluids, we talked about blood, milk, saliva, urine. I pulled out feces and litter and raw milk just because those are super important. Everything's important, but those ones are more important. Surfaces and water and farms, on farms with potentially infected animals that might be contaminated with animal waste. So just whatever you are doing, make sure you're protecting yourself as much as possible. So a reminder, zoonotic transmission, spread of the disease agents from animals to humans. We're most worried about those people who have immunocompromised populations. My highlights of things you should do: wash your hands, respiratory and eye protection, don't put things in your mouth. So don't put needle caps in your mouth, don't eat while you're processing calves. If you're gonna put your tobacco patch or whatever the heck in it, I don't know what it's called because I don't do it. If you're gonna do that, make sure you have clean hands. Don't eat sunflower seeds while you are processing animals. These are all suggestions I have gotten from my BQA state coordinators. And then pasteurize your dairy products and be careful around those stillborn or aborted fetuses. So just be really careful when you're around those. There's a lot of things that we can get exposed to. These are different resources that I think are very useful. So Center for Food Security and Public Health provided a lot of these slides. CDC has some great information on zoonotic diseases. BQA and the National Dairy Farm Program both have really great biosecurity sections in their programs. AgriSafe, have you guys used AgriSafe before? They have some fantastic webinars that come out, and as Whitney will talk about, it is Farm Safety Week, but AgriSafe has a lot of great resources online in Spanish, in English that you can download, so check them out. And then your state's Department of Ag. Dr. Baldwin and Dr. McCarty are fantastic. Make sure you're connecting with them on anything. I did put their website on here, so they have avian influenza updates that they're mostly focused on the animal health piece, but they partner with the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. So CDPHE emailed me this morning and gave me some resources, but I can share those with you, maybe Brittany later. So how many of you guys have seen the Swiss cheese theory when COVID was going around? So this is, so it's basically like, these are all layers of mitigation for disease risk. And so one layer is helpful, but it's not gonna protect you against everything because there are always holes that the pathogens can get through. So we have to layer our mitigation steps to make it more effective. And so I changed it to zoonotic disease and added some things. So any of our zoonotic disease risks things, so eggs, obviously eggs can also carry some things. Cows, sheep, or dogs and cats, milk. I put turtles on here. Turtles, well, reptiles in general have salmonella on them. And so if you have small children with baby reptiles, there's always a salmonella risk. So that's why I put that on there. So anyway, so training is the #1 thing I think we could do to help our workers understand what they might be exposed to, but also what to do if they do think they get sick. Food hygiene, masks, gloves, hand hygiene, cleaning and disinfection, time, and then surface cleaning. All of that layered on top of each other is how we reduce risk to getting zoonotic diseases. So each intervention or layer has imperfections, and multiple layers improve success. So that's my lesson for today. And always food. So it comes down to what you can control. Every operation is going to be different. Everyone has a different number of people working for them, different experiences, different languages. So what can you control on your farm? And that's what biosecurity and protection from zoonotic disease comes down to. So here's my case study that I wanted to show you. This is from my friend, veterinary friend in Pennsylvania. So this is a Holstein heifer, 6 months pregnant, presented with a left limb lameness and salivation. Normal temp, hydration, behavior, she was actually okay. Poor rumen function, she had an LVA, losing muscle on that lame leg, normal exam. She wanted to eat and drink, but wouldn't. So if you saw this on your farm, 1, you should call your vet. 2, you should have gloves on if you touch it. But what would you think of this? You're not allowed to talk. What would you be afraid of with this? Nervous ketosis could do this. Toxin in the feed could cause this. But the number one thing that I think about with any animal that has abnormal nervous signs like this is rabies, and that's what this cow had. But it was lower on the list. So my vet friend, she did an oral exam like we do on when we have sick animals. Veterinarians are, when we do a full physical exam, we even look at the mouth. She was wearing gloves, but I'm not sure she was wearing sleeves. So her skin got exposed to that saliva. She had to go through the prophylactic shots. Prophylactic, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Well, they're not in the stomach anymore, but yeah. But she said that it knocked her out for a week while she was getting those.
Yeah.
But that is why I tell you to put the minute, if you think your hand needs to go into the mouth of an animal, you have to have a glove on, just because you don't want to be exposed to rabies. That's a real bad thing. So that is all I have. Any questions, comments, curiosity?
So back to the poop issue.
Yes.
We're shipping yearlings this time of year, and invariably we get trucks that come in that have not cleaned. They've hauled fats. They come to the ranch. You can't get cattle to go to the bottom of a semi when it's full of water.
Right.
So we have to let them drain out. What kind of protocol would you have to drain those trucks? And
if you can, God, you will not believe how many conversations we've had on this, and it just depends on the relationship you have with that truck driver. But if you have to do it on your place, if you have to, I would be completely away from any food and water resource that you have. I would be away from anywhere that your animals have access to that. So, and not into a creek. I feel like everybody dumps stuff into a creek, but don't do that, or into a creek bed, because then that contamination, if you get a rainstorm, it's washing it down to everybody down south. And that includes carcass disposal. Don't carcass disposal into a creek bed. But it's basically away from traffic patterns. So you don't want to do it in the middle of a road where people are going to be driving through it. Right. So wherever that is, because I don't know your operation, but away from feed and water, away from where your animals have access to it, and away from traffic patterns.
And someplace that's not above all of those things.
Right.
Top of a hill, bad.
Yeah.
And if you can, try to get that company or that dispatcher to be like, hey, we need to be better about this. So.
We do. They're truckers. I think we all understand.
Well, some truckers, I'm learning this, because with BQA transportation, all of the phone calls, I get the phone calls. So I'm learning that there's a spectrum of all types of truckers. Same thing as spectrum of all types of cattle producers and all types of livestock owners. So there are some people his family's company, it's a trucking company in Nebraska. They won a BQA award winner for Marketer of the Year, but they have their own washout, and they clean out their trucks at least once a day. And they're actually the site for the local Cargill plant. If a foot and mouth disease outbreak happens and they need somewhere to disinfect their vehicles, they've got it. So I've seen the spectrum of, so at least try to have the conversation. That's the hard part, because I think sometimes we just don't even want to have the conversation. But that's a hard spot to be in.
So if we dedicate a place and we dump a truck, how long before? How do you manage it? Is it like composting? Or?
Oh God, that is a great question. I don't know if I have the answer, but I'm totally gonna ask somebody about that. I'll write it down, and I can give you my card, or I guess you have my email.
Yeah.
Email me, and I will try to find some information, because I have some, because it likely comes down to what your local NRCS and EPA says too. But I'll see if I can find some guidelines.
Okay.
Yeah.
And potentially what pathogens it is.
I mean, that's the hard, I mean,
That's
we
the
can
hard
only
part.
guess.
Some are really durable and some are not, so
Yeah.
it's hard.
I mean, if it's out in the
Anthrax
sun,
is like
and it's time,
standard.
yeah, season plays a role, you know, like if you're dumping it in the middle of winter.
Yeah.
Even though, you know, our winters, our cold weather generally only lasts a couple of days and then it'll get warm again, but you know what I mean. Any other questions? I did send slides out to Brittany, so she shared those with you.
Julie, just a question on bird flu in the dairy sector over the last year. Kind of what's your thoughts on where are we at? And I guess once it kind of goes through our dairy industry here in Colorado, are we immune to it or could it come back or
I don't think
any
we have,
insight on any of that?
I don't think we have answers to that yet because, so even our dairy herds in Texas, that were some of our first ones that we diagnosed in March, the cows that stayed on the dairy, because not all the cows that were infected stayed on the dairy, they're just now starting to calve. And so I think over the next, I bet, year or more, we're still gonna be getting answers, because we don't know the long-term effect of what this virus had on our animals. So I don't know that. I think if, however people feel about high-path avian influenza in the dairy industry, veterinarians and anybody in preventive medicine, we were like, it's a very big dry run for other diseases that could be even more devastating than high-path has been, so like foot and mouth disease. And so we're trying to use this as a lesson of, we know that these are the things we can do to prevent at least this virus from getting into our herds or how we handle it. Trying to get people to learn those lessons and to implement those practices now, because then if something worse happens later, we're prepared a little bit, but I really don't know that answer. And Maggie, Dr. Baldwin said that she was gonna try to come today and she couldn't make it work, but I mean,
The CDA site is probably the best resource in
Right,
Colorado.
yeah, to see what that is. I mean, so I'm on a few different national work groups where we're talking between states, between veterinarians, between state vets and everything with high-path avian influenza. And as challenging as it has been to do a lot of testing, what Colorado is doing, it's providing us so much information to how we can handle this in the future. So if you guys know people who are, I know it's not easy to be doing that right now, but the information is so important, and we can't make educated guesses or educated responses without data, and that's what that's providing us, so.
Well, I think, Brian, to answer your question, all of that data is helping show that the virus itself hasn't mutated
Yes.
so much yet, right? So the strain as it currently is, we would think there would be herd immunity. So this current strain, once it circulates, until it mutates like COVID did for people, until it mutates, we can maintain herd immunity. But that is the reason why we want to practice such strict biosecurity, is the more we can contain it, the less likely the virus is to mutate.
And we don't know, I don't think we know in the moment how long that immunity lasts.
Yes, that's true.
So that's the other piece where I don't have an answer for you. So I think the hard part is we have to keep trucking and we have to keep protecting our industry, and that means doing a lot of testing and working. But I mean, I work for the beef industry, even though, you know, dairy animals have a second career as beef, so I work for the dairy industry too. But I think I tell our producers that we can learn a lot from what the dairy industry has had to go through. Like, we don't do biosecurity very well on our cattle farms, and so I think we could be taking, even if we're doing a few extra steps to protect our cattle better, that's what we could be learning from this. I don't know. I don't have good answers for you. I just know that we have to keep pushing the prevention and biosecurity, because that's what's gonna keep us, that's what's gonna keep businesses continuing to operate. Right on time. Well, thank you. I'm gonna stay around, so if you guys have other questions, or I can hand you my business card. Oh, I did want to show you. So if you guys don't already have protective gear, so these, I love Uddertex, but there are a lot of different other brands that have these. These are waterproof coveralls that I wear on, I wear these palpating, or if I'm working on any birthing animal. also have waterproof scrub tops, so I did this, like if I was doing a C-section or anything, I have these, so I could stay clean and dry, especially when it's -10 out. Coveralls, obviously, if you don't have, over boots, I even wore my cowboy boots here to show you how easy this is, if you don't know this trick. I'll fall over.
You get a picture.
How good is your balance?
You can't get carnival shacks like that in Colorado anymore.
I know. You can't in eastern Colorado. But anyway, so, I use the plastic sacks, and then they slide in and out a lot easier. Not that I wear boots for a long period of time anyway, but, I carry these in my car, or my Jeep, so if I'm on a ranch or anything and I can't wash my hands, I can at least clean it like this. Clean your, steering wheel and everything you touch, because your hands are always covered in stuff.
Kick that foot up. What'd you do with your boot, or the sack?
I put the sack around my boot, and then it slides in and out of the boot easier.
Oh, the rubber boot?
Yeah.
Okay.
Even though this is, my boot's gonna come off right now, but I wear hiking boots when I'm working cows, so this works really well when I put my hiking shoes on and off. But any way that you can make this easier for you or your operators, that's really important. So, you guys can also check this out here. Oh, my